And then it's tariff. Because tariffs are going to make us rich as hell. It's going to bring our country's businesses back.
To see how these tariffs will impact Japan and Americans buying cars.
Short term, we have to brace for impact. We work hard to find a way to overcome these incremental costs.
Those incremental costs at the moment are huge.
The collapse didn't happen overnight. 5 of Asia's biggest automakers are now walking away from the United States, and the consequences are cascading through the heart of America's auto belt. Detroit, once celebrated as a motor capital of the world, is now facing the reality of shuttered plants, abandoned production lines, and mass layoffs that cut deep into the American working class. In 2025 alone, more than 38,000 jobs vanished, leaving families across the Midwest scrambling to survive. Paychecks that once meant security and stability have been replaced with anxiety, mounting debt, and the kind of uncertainty that gnaws at entire communities. Consumers are feeling the sting just as sharply. New car prices have soared by $5,000 to $10,000, pushing once affordable models out of reach for middle-class households. As showrooms empty out, millions of Americans are being driven into the used car market, where even vehicles more than a decade old now command inflated prices. The crunch is reshaping the way people think about mobility, forcing families to hold on to aging cars or take on risky loans just to keep up with basic transportation needs. North of the border, the story looks different. Canada, with its friendlier trade environment, is reaping the benefits of America's turmoil. The very companies shutting down operations in the US are investing heavily in Canadian factories and cities, redrawing the North American auto map. Once, the United States stood as the unrivaled center of the car industry. Now, the balance of power is shifting, raising an unavoidable question. Why would global giant abandon what was once their most profitable market? At the center of this exodus stands Toyota, a company that for decades dominated American highways with unmatched reliability and trust. For years, Toyota was the best-selling foreign brand in the United States, its name synonymous with durability and family-friendly design. But in 2025, this giant became the prime casualty of the 25% tariff wall imposed by Washington. The financial toll is staggering. Losses projected to reach nearly $19 billion in a single fiscal year, wiping away years of growth in one blow. The company's ambitious push into electric vehicles, once central to its North American strategy, has been throttled. Supply chains that once hummed with global efficiency have become snarled with tariffs, shipping delays, and runaway costs. The consequences have been immediate. Market shares slipping as consumers, hit with sticker shock, abandoned Toyota showrooms in favor of cheaper used models or rival brands. The loyalty that Toyota cultivated over decades is eroding quietly but steadily. Faced with this pressure, executives are now weighing whether the United States, once the heart of their business, is worth the fight. Canada and Europe, with friendlier policies and more predictable supply chains, suddenly look safer than a US market that feels hostile and unstable. For the former king of the road, the message is clear. Even the most dominant player can be cornered that if Toyota's decline shows the scale of disruption, Nissan's unraveling illustrates its depth. For years, the company hailed North America as its golden land, a region of steady profits and long-term promise. But by 2025, that dream curdled into a nightmare. Losses reached a record-breaking $5.3 billion in a single year, the largest in Nissan's history. This was not a bad quarter, nor a temporary downturn. It was a collapse that cut into the very foundation of its North American operations. The retreat has already begun. Production of staple models like the Pathfinder, Murano, and Frontier for the Canadian market has been halted, severing a pipeline that once defined the brand's regional identity. Even more precarious are Nissan's operations in Mexico, where factories producing more than 320,000 vehicles annually for export to the US now face existential uncertainty. Decades of investment in North America hang in the balance. Once deeply rooted in Detroit's industrial landscape, Nissan has become the clearest example of an automaker not leaving by choice, but by necessity. For the company, the conditions to stay have simply become impossible. Hyundai's struggle tells yet another side of the story, how policy missteps ripple far beyond economics. For Hyundai, tariffs were only half the problem. The second blow came through immigration crackdowns that gutted its workforce. Financial losses arrived first, with the company reporting a $66 million hit in the second quarter of 2025 and a 16% plunge in operating profit. For a brand that had once positioned itself as a fast-rising challenger in the American market, the reversal was both swift and punishing. But the deeper wound came at Hyundai's Georgia plant, where immigration raids led to the arrest of 475 Korean workers, employees critical to the company's electric vehicle program. Overnight, flagship EV projects were thrown into limbo, and promises of 8,500 new American jobs evaporated. The impact stretched far beyond the factory gates. Local families suddenly lost their livelihoods. Entire communities that depended on Hyundai's payroll were thrown into crisis, and in Seoul, outrage boiled over into politics. The South Korean president was forced to intervene, turning what began as a labor disruption into a full-blown diplomatic crisis. Hyundai's plight revealed the unintended consequences of policy decisions, how they can fracture industries, destabilize communities, and even strain international alliances. For Subaru, the crisis has been uniquely devastating. Unlike its larger rivals, Subaru built its identity on the American market to a degree few other automakers dared. More than 70% of its global sales came from the United States. That reliance once seemed like a strength. Steady growth, loyal customers, and a clear brand identity. But when tariffs struck, the foundation cracked. Projections now show Subaru could lose as much as $2.5 billion in fiscal 2026, a staggering figure for a company of its modest size. The pain cuts deeper because of Subaru's customers. Middle-class families once saw its models as practical, reliable, and affordable. Rising costs have now turned those same vehicles into unaffordable luxuries, pushing buyers toward competitors or forcing them to cling to aging cars longer than planned. Unlike Toyota or Hyundai, Subaru cannot easily pivot investments to Europe or Southeast Asia. Its business is too tightly tied to American consumers, leaving it with few escape routes. The very strategy that once made Subaru a quiet success has become its greatest liability. By placing nearly all its bets on the US, Subaru now finds itself trapped, caught between shrinking demand, rising prices, and no quick path forward together. These stories reveal more than the struggles of individual companies. They expose a broader truth about how fragile the auto industry has become under the weight of tariffs, shifting policies, and broken supply chains. What once felt unshakable, the dominance of the American car market, is now slipping away, leaving factories silent, communities adrift, and rivals abroad waiting to seize the opportunities left behind. Mazda has long carried the reputation of being a niche brand, supported by a loyal if modest customer base. For years, that loyalty offered a sense of stability, a belief that a company of its size could weather storms larger automakers faced. But in 2025, that assumption collapsed. What once seemed like insulation quickly revealed itself as vulnerability. The company was not too small to escape the consequences of tariffs. It was simply too small to absorb them. The first blow came south of the border. Exports from Mexico to the United States, a lifeline for Mazda's supply chain, collapsed by 54% in just 4 months. Plants designed to serve the American market were suddenly silenced, their output trapped behind tariff walls that had been built with the promise of protecting jobs but instead starved entire production lines. The company tried to adapt by redirecting resources. Production for Canada was halted altogether, with assets shifted in a desperate attempt to preserve even a sliver of U.S. sales. Yet the effort was futile. Costs continued to climb, demand shrank, and profits evaporated as if tariffs weren't enough. A new threat emerged from across the Pacific. Low-cost Chinese electric vehicles began flooding global markets, undercutting Mazda at every turn. Already running on thin margins, the brand found itself squeezed between collapsing exports and ruthless competition. What was once a quiet, steady player in the industry was now staring into the possibility of being pushed further into obscurity. Mazda's struggle revealed a sobering truth. In this trade war, survival is not guaranteed by size, loyalty, or reputation. Even the quietest brands can be dragged into the crossfire. For months, public debate about tariffs has focused on corporate profits and global supply chains, but the most devastating consequences have landed squarely on American families. By 2025, stepping into a dealership felt like entering another economic reality. Price tags that once reflected years of careful savings had suddenly soared. New vehicles cost between $5,000 and $10,000 more than the year before. Even models built in the United States, long assumed to be insulated from the storm, weren't spared, climbing an additional $3,000 on average. Technology and contracts that once seemed destined for Detroit, plants that could have anchored American jobs, are now rising north of the border, signaling a quiet but profound shift in where the future of the North American auto industry will be built. For Detroit, the fallout is devastating. Once the undisputed global capital of car manufacturing, it now risks becoming a monument to a vanished era. Empty lots and idle factories stand as stark reminders that prestige is fleeting and that market leadership can dissolve as quickly as investment relocates. The city that symbolized America's industrial might is fading, not because of technological disruption or consumer preference, but because of policy choices that reshape the global playing field. The rest of the world is paying close attention. What was once the safest and most profitable auto market has been recast as unstable and unpredictable. Foreign investors now question whether the United States remains a trustworthy destination for long-term capital. And that raises a more unsettling question. If the auto industry can crumble under the weight of protectionism, what sector will be next? This is not just about cars. It is about a turning point in America's place in the global economy. If international manufacturers no longer see the U.S. as a safe harbor, the implications could spread across industry from technology to energy to agriculture. The unraveling of trust in one sector can become the first domino in a much larger collapse. The danger is not only the loss of jobs or higher prices, it is the erosion of America's role as a stable center of global commerce. The auto industry's crisis is a warning. It shows how quickly protectionist policies can turn inward, punishing the very workers and consumers they promise to protect, while opening doors for rivals abroad. And as Canada quietly builds what America has abandoned, the question grows louder. If this is what America first means for cars, what comes next for everything else?